Wait a second, Luke. I'm confused. This video is titled, Has Joe Biden Let Progressives Down Already? But he's only been in charge for 1 week. Did that sound sincere?
Oh my God, Michael. Just 1 week, but we're still doing it. We're still going to review Joe Biden's first week because here's the thing. When you are president for just 1 week, some may even say 1 day, you can already get a sense of how a presidency is going. And so this is a very, very early review of the Joe Biden presidency. And what we're going to be doing today is taking a comprehensive look at all the major stuff Biden has done, what direction he is going in, etc., and therefore deciding whether it was worth voting for him if you were a progressive, say if you were a Bernie Sanders supporter or something like that. And of course, the reason why we're going to be looking at this is because one of the criticisms of Joe Biden was that nothing will really change if he got elected compared to Donald Trump. I mean, he literally said that to a bunch of rich donors. Nothing will change for you if he's president. So we're going to go through whether he's done a good job or a bad job so far from a progressive perspective, and we're going to start off looking at social policies first, Michael. So do you want to kick us off with a few of the things that Biden's done?
Well, Luke, Joe Biden has done a lot. Among them, he has rescinded the 1776 commission created under the Trump administration to help reshape how public schools teach the history of slavery.
Pure white nationalist propaganda, that. Go on. Yeah.
Yes. He's ended the previous administration's travel restrictions on several Muslim-majority countries. He's strengthened the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, aka DACA, program via executive order. He's halted the construction of new border security installations along the US-Mexico border, and just to show it's not all immigration and race issues, he signed an executive order preventing workplace discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation. So you could say a pretty robust resume from a progressive social policies perspective, couldn't you?
Yes, Michael. I think all of those things that you mentioned, the progressives or Democrats in general would agree with, and that's unsurprising. This was one of the areas where, obviously he was going to have massive differences to Donald Trump, some cynical people would say, because it's one of the areas like social policies which doesn't cost the elites in society anything, so he can do whatever he likes on this issue and not get any pushback. Also you needed to mention that he's signed a moratorium. That means deportations will not happen for the next 100 days.
Oh, yes.
Only 100 days. So there is that. But there is also still the fact that kids are still in quote-unquote cages, which is...
Get over it. Trump isn't in charge anymore.
I know, but that's the thing. Like, he hasn't really done anything on that. And that is something, of course, that was a big deal during Trump's administration. And I do wonder, because it's surely going to be such an easy win for Biden to, try and sign an executive order to reunite mothers with their kids. But it's all quiet on that front yet. So, let's see what happens.
Possibly one of the few examples where you could have an act with, you get those acts like the Patriot Act, obviously, that have these names that are designed to make it so if you're against, you'd have Reunite Children with Their Parents Act. And it sounds like one of those acts where it's intentionally there to be to sound nicer than it is. It's nope, that's literally what it is. We have an act now to reunite children with their parents, because that was apparently a thing that needed to be done in this country. So I do like the fact that you could literally have, like you say, it should be so popular that it sounds like it should almost be like one of those fake bills, like the Patriot Act or something.
Yeah, and let's see if he does it, but nothing yet so far. Anyway, I think we should move on to foreign policy now, because that is the area where the president has the most power, and we all expected Biden would knock it out of the park, so to speak, on social policy, even if, the kids are still in the cages. But foreign policy now. Joe Biden, he's done quite a lot of things since he's come into the presidency. First off, he has appointed Lord Austin as Secretary of Defense. Now, as you can tell from the picture up on your screen, Lloyd Austin is someone who is black, the first ever black Secretary of Defense. Wow, what an incredible moment. Apart from the fact that he is someone who is on the board of Raytheon. And this is funny because Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense was a man called Mark Esper. And Mark Esper, even though he was white, was also a member of Raytheon. He was, in fact, Raytheon's top lobbyist before joining the Trump administration. Michael, we got some different coloured faces, but still the same old Raytheon influence there. I wouldn't say that's quite progressive, would you?
It sounds like these industries involved in the military are quite complex. And they all just spread everywhere. You could say there's a military-industrial complex, No, yeah, basically that's it. Ultimately, you do have... It's not just about parties in America. And I guess the term that's thrown around is corporatocracy. And that's kind of something which I think Americans maybe don't think about. The fact it's not just what parties are involved, it's what corporations are involved. And obviously, you can get a situation where there's different parties, but when you look at which corporations are controlling it, it's the same thing. Obviously, these Raytheon people, they've done some pretty bad things, mostly war profiteering. They've sold arms to Saudi Arabia in order to perpetuate the war crimes going on in Yemen. And yet, it doesn't matter whether you vote for Trump or Biden, their representatives are going to be on the cabinet deciding American foreign policy.
Yeah, and let's be clear, what's happening in Yemen is one of the worst atrocities right now in the world, fully backed by the United States under the Trump administration. And will that change? Well, maybe Lloyd Austin's appointment as Secretary of Defense would indicate no, but then we did have some good news here. So this is from Jennifer Hansler on Twitter, who covers the State Department for CNN. She said that US Secretary of State Blinken confirmed that the Biden administration will end support for the Saudi-led campaign in Yemen. This was before his inauguration. He said that the Houthis bear significant responsibility for what's happened in Yemen, of course, but the way the campaign has been conducted has also contributed significantly to that situation, and so our support should end. Good news, they're ending their support. The president-elect has made clear that we will end our support for the military campaign led by Saudi Arabia in Yemen, and I think we will work on that in very short order once the president-elect is president. Of course, this was before the inauguration. Blinken was vague when asked what ending support looked like. Says, it looks like, first and foremost, making sure we understand exactly what support we're actually currently providing. He says they have to be very clear with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So that initially looks quite good, doesn't it? He's ending support for Saudi Arabia and their war on Yemen is Joe Biden, but like Jennifer Hansler said, US Secretary of State Blinken was very vague about it. What does ending support mean? Does that mean ending arms sales to Saudi Arabia? Is that? I mean, if that would be the case, that would be great. But somehow I doubt it, considering that, of course, Lloyd Austin, who used to work for Raytheon, is now the Secretary of Defense. And also, of course, where is Raytheon based, Michael? This is very key. It's based in Arizona. And that is a very important swing state. And this is why Donald Trump decided to sell all those weapons to Saudi Arabia back in 2018. It's because, well, Raytheon's based in Arizona. He said they support a lot of United States jobs, which is true in a very important state. And that's a great thing for a defense contractor, or any company really. Make sure you set up in a swing state. So if you lose jobs, it'll hurt the incoming president or president who's trying to fight an election. I don't know what the situation is going to be in Yemen in the future. It looks a bit up in the air at the moment, but as always, I'm a quite cynical person, so I'd say that the United States is going to continue selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, and the ending of support maybe will be just quietly condemning them on the international stage. Maybe that'll be as far as it goes. What do you think?
Yeah. I think you have reason to be cynical because, of course, let's never forget the fact that Obama won the Nobel. He's the only Nobel Peace Prize winner, as we love to say, who has bombed another Nobel Peace Prize winner, which is my favorite fact. And obviously, it gets to the fact that Democrats are as much, if not sometimes even more so, war hawks than Republicans are. And obviously, Obama did huge, terrible things in Yemen and Pakistan, obviously the drone strike program. That's why we could conclude that Biden will continue the same thing. And then also, I think there is the fact that for some reason, I don't know why this is, but countries on the international stage tend to behave worse, I think, even than they do on a domestic level. So even with Joe Biden perhaps being better on his domestic policies, obviously we've already covered the fact that he's quite progressive on his social policies, it's still very much possible that America will continue to just be evil on the international stage. And I think maybe that's because it's more shielded from public scrutiny, and therefore you can get corporations going in there and getting their money and working their influence. This has been happening since America really became a superpower post-1945. Far from being cynical, I'd say there's anybody who thinks this is going to stop, who's assuming this is going to stop, is being incredibly naive.
Yes, I agree. It is unfortunate, but the world is a cynical, harsh place, Michael, and that moves us nicely onto our next topic, Jerusalem. Now, of course, the Trump administration moved the United States Embassy to Jerusalem in 2018, I want to say, a move which was widely condemned by the international community for stirring up tensions. Joe Biden has come in, Michael. He's now the president. He has the opportunity to move the US Embassy back to where it was, but he's not going to do it. He's keeping it in Jerusalem. And this is unsurprising, as Biden has always been one of the biggest supporters of Israel when he was in the Senate. One of the reasons he was picked in 2008 was because of his support for Israel. You see, Obama was kind of an unknown capacity for Israel. He said all the right things, but of course you can never be too sure. So appointing Joe Biden as vice president did assuage those fears that the Israelis had. It's like, okay, this guy, he's still on our side if he's picking Joe Biden. Having Biden in the White House is going to be good for us. So yeah, even though Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu had a very special relationship apparently, I don't expect that the US relations with Israel are going to worsen at all. And yeah, the embassy is going to be kept in Jerusalem. I suspect if Israel want to knock down a few more houses in the West Bank that are owned by Palestinians to replace them with Jewish people, a form of ethnic cleansing. I don't suspect that the US government are going to hit back at them, to be honest.
Yeah, I think also there's the fact that there is a difference between not having the embassy in Jerusalem, which is one thing, versus moving it away. And I think obviously America or Biden, but the American political culture in general, would really struggle to countenance the idea of specifically moving the embassy back. I think it's kind of likely that with America being as it is, as soon as the embassy was moved to Jerusalem, there was very little chance anyone was ever going to be able to move it back. Well, it sums
up US politics quite well. It's like the Republicans do a really bad thing, and then the Democrats, they can't move it back because they're afraid of doing it. Or, and this, I don't know if maybe Biden was actually supported that move, considering how much of a support of Israel he was. And yeah, that's the game that's been played for decades. But let's move on from Israel now, Michael, to talk about Venezuela, because Juan Guaido, or the Beto O'Rourke of Venezuela, as Donald Trump called him, is still going to be recognised as the president of Venezuela by Biden, even though the EU have even dropped that claim. They don't consider Guaido the leader of Venezuela, but the Biden administration still will do that. And this is quite interesting because it may be an indication that there will be a coup attempt that will take place in Venezuela in the next 4 years, because of course Donald Trump was, I don't know if he was ever going to do it, but he was interested in doing it, but apparently he was just too lazy. He couldn't be bothered to do it. And yeah, like he said, he wasn't a fan of Juan Guaido, calling him the Beto O'Rourke of Venezuela. But Joe Biden, that may be one of the differences to the Trump administration, an actual worse difference. He may actually try a coup in Venezuela. Let's see if it happens. But given Biden's past when it comes to foreign policy, and given now that Trump's out the way, the US Defense Department and the CIA might be feeling themselves a bit more, this could definitely happen. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think obviously with the Venezuela thing, it's more about ideology than obviously with Israel and Saudi Arabia. It's about these long-standing partnerships. And obviously that means you are going to get all of these journalists and stuff talking about how that we need to enforce Guaido's rule because he's the rightful ruler because of democracy. And it's much easier, I guess, to sell it as like an ideological principled belief. As for whether or not it's going to be actioned, I think on the one hand, it does feel like I'm almost trusting Biden to be like, let's not start something when there's so much else going on. In which case, I feel like the only chance we'd have a coup would be much later on this term, like maybe 2023, 2024. That's one possibility. Having said that, I also feel like with Biden, one of the things he's established himself by is his willingness to go with experts and his willingness to kind of defer to other people. I think that's something which he sold himself on, particularly with regards to COVID, like trusting the experts. And I think maybe there's a chance then that he's going to be listening to all sorts of people from, the CIA and corporate interests who are going to want to push this point.
Yeah, as the thing, I think they're all going to want to have the coup. So if your experts are saying it, and maybe they can use COVID as an excuse, there's always that. So let's talk about one of the good points actually from Biden's foreign policy in his first few days. And we've talked a lot about, the bad stuff, the Israeli embassy, the Venezuela thing, Lloyd Austin, but Rob Malley has been hired as Joe Biden's Iran envoy. So he's been sent to Tehran to negotiate with the Iranians, repair relations after, of course, what happened under Donald Trump. That needs to happen, of course, and Biden recognises that, which is good. Basically, Rob Malley is a supporter of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Of course, Trump withdrew from that in 2018, and then just over a year ago bombed Soleimani, a legendary Iranian general, of course, and people were worried that might start a war between the US and Iran. Eventually didn't, and then COVID hit, which kind of put things on ice until Biden has got in right now. And this is a good thing because the Iran nuclear deal, prevents war with Iran. I think that's a good thing. You have the likes of Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, who's a big Iran hawk, who condemned this move because they want a war with Iran. That's their main goal. And Tom Cotton is somebody who has for years and years been banging on about going to war with the Iranians. And yeah, considering a war with Iran could have happened, there was a possibility just a little over a year ago of it occurring. I think this move to quell those tensions is a good one from Biden. So yeah, I support this move. What do you think?
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, Iran is, well, there's no reason to go to war with them. It feels like such an obvious thing to say. And the only reason why people really want to is obviously because of the regional geopolitics involving the Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And obviously Yemen's a big part of that. And then, of course, there's just the standard, much more cynical and probably much more immediate. The military-industrial complex wants it because it means they can make more money. And, of course, the best thing for the United States to do is try and cool down the situation. And that seems like what Biden's going to do. I imagine he will continue to do it in a way that favors Saudi Arabia over Iran. Obviously, there is that Cold War going on, and the US, I mean, obviously you saw that quote about how the Houthis are responsible for elevating the situation in Yemen. Of course, the Houthis are the Iran-backed group. You know, the US is going to continue to present Saudi Arabia, it's laughable, but present Saudi Arabia as like the good guys and Iran as this evil group. But I think Biden's unlikely to want to elevate it to a hot war.
Yeah.
He's going to want to keep it cool.
Exactly. Like, that's the thing with Biden. He thinks a war with Iran is unwinnable, so he doesn't want to fight it. And, you know, you could look at Donald Trump. Perhaps he didn't think that, and certainly Tom Cotton, just absolute crazy neocons like him, don't think that either. They think they can win a war with Iran, which is totally insane. So, you know, I think if Iran wasn't that big a military power, oh yeah, you can bet there would be plans to invade it from the Democrats, or indeed when Donald Trump was president. But thankfully there's an understanding that war with Iran would be completely stupid, which is why I think this deal was signed back in 2015 anyway, and Biden re-entering that is going to be a good thing. He has also rejoined the Paris Accord. Apparently he is not for the people of Pittsburgh, he is for the people of Paris. That is a right-wing talking point, which may be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. But that's what he's doing, which is, of course, a good thing. And the fact that he is actually going to cancel the Keystone pipeline. He's going to revoke the permit, which embarrassed Justin Trudeau quite a bit, which is hilarious given what Justin Trudeau portrays himself as in terms of a climate change battler. But yeah, that's good news all around there. So, you know, some things on the environment, particularly in terms of international politics, Biden is doing well. And yeah, that's something I guess to be applauded, Michael. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a calculating person could argue that US hawkishness when it comes to war will easily be responsible for fewer deaths than US inaction and obtuseness when it comes to climate change. And ultimately, that I have heard people throwing around this idea of the US being a global leader when it comes to climate change. That's certainly possible. I think Joe Biden's not going to be pursuing something like the Green New Deal, but he certainly could be pursuing something approaching it, because I think that's an area where Democrats are becoming more willing to, I guess, stand up to the corporate overlords.
So now, finally, we're going to have a look at Biden's economic or domestic policies more specifically in this last section. And first off, good news, Joe Biden is going to allow workers to draw unemployment benefits if they quit jobs they fear are unsafe amid the pandemic, by asserting that workers have a federally guaranteed right to refuse employment that will jeopardize their health, and if they do so, they will still qualify for unemployment insurance. So that's an executive order he signed recently, in contrast to what Trump did, which was say, no, if you quit your job, you're not allowed to do that. Donald Trump, a real fan of the working class, isn't he? But that's a good thing. He's also extended the eviction moratorium, and that's a couple of executive orders that he's put in. But now, Michael, I want to talk about the $1,400 checks that he's proposing, because this is the key thing. Like we said in the last video, there was $2,000 checks promised if the Democrats took the Senate, and Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock won their respective races. But, of course, this is just an incredibly sneaky thing to do. Oh yeah, because in the previous stimulus, we gave you $600 checks. Now you're only getting $1,400, because $1,400 plus $600 is $2,000. So there you go. That's one of the parts of the $1.9 trillion stimulus. And here's the thing about Biden. He never wanted to send out these checks. He never said it during the election, you know, when he was in the debates, that yes, you're going to get $2,000 checks. And while this debate raged over Christmas about how much money the American people should be sent, Biden actually was very quiet until literally the last minute. I remember there was this clip of a reporter shouting the question at him, "Are you in favour of $2,000 checks?" as he walked out the room, and he just went, "Yes," at the end. And considering, how much of a vote winner that was, why wouldn't you be all over that right from the get-go? But yeah, right at the last minute, he jumped in. And here's the thing, that right there does indicate that he doesn't really want to do this, and $1,400, again, it's better than nothing, but yeah, considering he promised $2,000, it's quite a slap in the face, I'd say. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the big standout is the cynicism of being like, oh, well, it's actually 2,000 in total, though, because you got 600 before. And yeah, definitely Biden doesn't want to give it out. And obviously that reflects on his wider economic policies, because it suggests that he doesn't understand the basic principle that giving the working class more spending power is better for the economy overall. It helps to stimulate the economy. It is a stimulus bill. And yet in his stimulus bill, he's being incredibly stingy in the money he's willing to give to the people who will stimulate the economy.
Yeah, I agree. I also saw this plan that apparently senior Democrats were drafting to send $3,000 to American families per kid. So if you had 2 kids, that's $6,000. But that was a few days ago. I haven't heard anything about that since. So who the hell knows what's going on there? But now, Michael, I want to talk about student debt, because this is an area which many progressives were hoping Biden would do something, because, a lot of progressives are young people and they have student debt. And Joe Biden has promised to cancel $10,000 in student debt. That was a promise he made before the election. Even though you had people like Chuck Schumer who were pushing to cancel, say, $50,000, Biden has decided not to do that much. But interestingly, this has not been included in his stimulus package that was released, that $1.9 trillion stimulus that we talked about before. But he does not need to pass this through Congress. It can be done by executive order. For instance, Biden on his first day did sign an executive order extending the pause on monthly payments for federal student loans until September 2021. So if you had loans, you don't have to pay any interest on them up until September 2021. If he can do that, why can't he cancel $10,000 or even $50,000? Or hell, all of it. Why can't he just do that immediately? The answer is he can, he doesn't want to. And this is a big area where, unfortunately, progressives can feel rightfully disappointed, because this would make a massive difference to so many people in America. Student debt is completely out of control, and still, Joe Biden, he hasn't done anything. And from all I could look, I scoured the internet, I looked at a lot of stuff, Michael. He doesn't appear to be any closer to revoking any student debt. And even then, it's only going to be $10,000.
I think ultimately it's the same issue as the $1,400 check thing, where he is just one of those people who doesn't seem to understand the meaning of stimulus. That obviously is about giving more spending power. And obviously, when you're talking about graduates, people who should be making some of the most money, having the most spending power, really driving the economy from the bottom, them being completely weighed down by debt is terrible. And obviously he needs to do it. Why isn't he going to do it? Because, like I think I've said, and you would probably agree, it's against his fundamental economic philosophy and neoliberal economic philosophy in general.
Yeah, and that is the difference between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden at the end of the day, why progressives were disappointed that Sanders lost, because, on day one, Sanders would have cancelled everything, and we're still waiting for Biden to give any sign that he's going to do it. So overall, Michael, I think we can say that Biden has let down progressives on some issues, particularly the economic issues we talked about just then. The $1,400 checks, I just can't believe they are still trying to do that. And, the lack of student debt cancellation. When it comes to foreign policy, you're getting probably what you expected. The military-industrial complex will still, like we said, be in charge, but perhaps a little bit better than Trump when it comes to Iran, but maybe even a bit worse when it comes to Venezuela. Who knows? And on social policies, of course, as we mentioned at the beginning, we know he was going to be good for that for progressives. So overall, if you are a progressive, should you feel let down by Joe Biden? I'd say no, not really, because this is what we kind of expected. He's a guy who's a centrist politician who years and years and years has not solved the issues that plague the United States and has indeed perpetuated them. And this is why it was so devastating that Bernie Sanders lost a year ago, because Joe Biden has come in and he's done pretty much what you expected. So is he better than Trump? Marginally, but that's all you're going to get.
Yeah, overall, I think it's kind of good and refreshing to have seen Biden be so on the ball in terms of jumping into these policies and signing these executive orders. I guess overall it does suggest that he's at least not going to be lazy and kind of dithering about compromising all that kind of stuff, which is nice to see. Obviously, like I said, he's been good on social policies. And like I also said, that's where we could have expected him to do well, because that doesn't cost the elites any money. I will say that I am somewhat more optimistic that Biden could introduce common sense policies that will be good for the US overall. And obviously, if you're a progressive, you should want America to be doing better off overall, because that's going to help the most people. And obviously, progressivism really is about helping the most people. So I am somewhat optimistic that we could see infrastructure reform and things like that under Biden. Overall, I think there was like a bell curve of like, on the one hand, Biden being worse than expected, on the other hand, Biden being better than expected. He's pretty much within the center of like most likely outcomes. So can you be disappointed? Not really. If anything, maybe a bit optimistic, but not very.
Yeah, if you expected Biden to be a 10 out of 10, you were being deluded. I expected probably, say, a 3 out of 10, and he's like at a 3.5 out of 10. So yeah, decently better than Trump, but not anywhere near the amount he actually needed to be to enact change in America that is sadly needed, Michael.
Indeed. Indeed.
Do it! Just do it! Yes, you can!